to finish the Catholic Church. That's why we're engaging this debate. Not because of disrespect, not because of overweening arrogance, but simply because we want to help build the church. If we view the church today after Vatican II, not as some hierarchy where someone issues commands and we all follow, but as the whole people of God. Eschatology is the branch of the theology that deals with the four last things. Even senators have to deal with the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell, and the final destiny of the soul and of humankind. In the past, Catholics viewed certain moral doctrines as immutable. Hindi na papalitan pa. Yan na yan. But today, many Catholics now accept that so-called immutable moral doctrines should be legitimately re-examined. One relevant shift in moral theology concerns the principle of proportionalism, which is a new way of looking at actions that cause a double effect, one good and one bad. According to the theory of proportionalism, a person does not sin in causing the bad effect if there was a proportionate reason. The basis for this theory is that there is no sin. There is no sin if the person's intention was aimed at a good effect and not at a bad effect. Thus, very few actions could be labeled as intrinsically evil. Certainly, RH is not an intrinsic evil. Another shift involves the identity of the priest, including the bishop. Today, being a priest really means, bullet, the person of the priest is no longer sacred. There is no longer a strict division between the sacred and the profane. Bullet, the treatment of priests and bishops as a special caste in society is no longer observed, as if we were a caste system and we were inferior mortals. The church does not consist of the priests and the bishops alone. The church consists of the whole faith community. Catholicism is no longer an affair of the person who happened to be born a Catholic, but an affair of the human being who is personally committed. Bullet, the priest is not a special person just because he performs strictly cultic tasks, kulto, such as presiding at the Eucharist and administering the sacraments. Pare-pareho lang naman tayo. With these recent developments in the identity of the priest, one historian has moved to comment, quote, "It is no wonder that many priests suffer from a sense of confusion about their role," unquote. The encyclical Humanae Vitae. The Catholic opposition to the RH bill is based on the 1968 encyclical Humanae Vitae, issued by Pope Paul VI. The Latin title literally means "of human life," but it is more popularly translated as "on the regulation of birth." This encyclical is the result of a special papal commission established by Pope John XXIII and concluded during the term of Pope Paul VI. The commission submitted two reports, the majority report and the minority report. The majority report proposed that contraception should no longer be condemned. The minority report urged the Pope to continue to condemn contraception. Paradoxically, Pope Paul VI decided in favor of the minority view. His unusual division shook the whole Catholic world, and that is the reason why Catholics in this country are so intensely divided over the RH bill. After Pope Paul VI rejected the majority report, many Catholics were no longer ready to give blind obedience to his decree. It is fair to say that no moral issue in the 20th century impacted so profoundly on the discipline of moral theology. As a result of the contretemps and the succeeding controversy, Catholics now raise such questions as, how conscience is to be sought? Paano malaman konsyensya mo pala yon? The response due to the ordinary magisterium or teaching function of the Pope and bishops, and the meaning of the guidelines of the Holy Spirit. Catholic theologians and even some episcopal conferences voiced opposition to the Humanae Vitae encyclical, or at least took positions that were less than enthusiastic in their support. Surveys in the United States, for example, have indicated that the overwhelming majority more than 80% of Catholics of childbearing age do not, in fact, observe the encyclical's teachings. On the one hand, the controversial encyclical adopted the Minority Report, which condemns artificial contraception based on the following arguments. Bullet, the constant and perennial teaching of the Church. Itong argumentong, yun naman palaging tuturo ng simbahan eh. Huwag na nating palitan, sundin na lang natin. Huwag na tayong mag-isip pa. Bullet, another argument. The natural law that certain acts and the generative processes are in some way especially inviolable precisely because they are generative. Huwag nating pakialaman yung panganak. Kasi importante yan eh. Wala na taong ating mundo, ang ating planeta, pag pinakalaman natin yan. Contraception is evil, according to them, because it changes an act which is naturally oriented to procreation into an act which is oriented to the mutual benefit of the spouses. Why am I not persuaded by this argument? During sex, people should only concentrate on having children. They should not concentrate on anything else. You might as well have sex with your eyes closed. I remember, I'm giving myself a break because I am short of breath. I'm very, very sorry. Please forgive me. I remember when I was immigration commissioner, I was asked if I was frightened of all the death threats, and I said, no, I'm not afraid. But, I'm not afraid to die, but I'm afraid that there might be no sex after death. I have thought and thought about the matter, I said when I was immigration commissioner, and I've reached the considered conclusion that yes, there is sex after death, but you cannot feel anything. On the other hand, the encyclical rejected the majority report, which supports artificial contraception based on the following arguments. Bullet, traditional teaching fails to recognize the evolutionary character of that teaching. Nagpapalit-palit tayo eh, hindi naman tayo pare-pareho palagi. For example, the official church has changed its teaching in such matters as religious liberty and usury. Dati, Katoliko lang pwedeng pumunta sa langit. Ngayon, pwede ng lahat. At dati, pag nagpahiram ka, pero nagsisingil ka ng interest, mortal sin iyon, pupunta ka na sa impyerno. Ngayon, hindi na. Ganon, nagpalit ang simbahan. A change in the traditional teaching would not necessarily undermine the moral teaching authority of the church. Hindi naman natin hangad na sirain natin ang kapangyarihan o impluensya ng Iglesia Katoliko. Such a change is to be seen rather as a step toward a more mature comprehension of the whole doctrine of the Church. Bullet. The natural law theory of those who support the traditional teaching has been proved to be erroneous. Because of this mentality, many advances in medical science were prohibited for a time, and the same was true of other areas of scientific experimentation. Alalahanin nyo, simbahan Katolika ang naghabol kay Copernicus. Ang sinabi naman ng pobre ay ganito, nung panahon na yon. Kanya, merong sun in the universe, and all the planets revolve around it. Boy, the Catholic Church was so furious. He suffered all his life for that scientific declaration. Ngayon naman, pinanganak si Galileo, otro rin. Sabi ni Galileo, tama, si Copernicus. Merong sun at lahat tayo, umiikot pala doon, nagalit na naman sa kanya. Pinakulong din siya, na-torture pa. Kaya ang ibig lang sabihin, nagkakamali rin tayo. Huwag tayong masyado namang mga api sa ayaw pumayag sa mga pinagsasabi natin. Because of this mentality, many advances in medical science were prohibited for a time, and the same was true of other areas of scientific experimentation. The conjugal act must be viewed not as an isolated reality, but in a larger context of human life, family life, education, etc. This is called the principle of totality. When you look at sex between man and woman, you must look on it in its totality. Sex, procreation, or fertility is only one aspect of a totality. Sexuality is not ordered only to procreation. How about if you go up to a beautiful young woman and say, how would you like to, will you please marry me? so I can have sex with you and have children. You think you're going to convince your girlfriend that way? Because basically that's what this argument amounts to. Or do you want to say, would you like to marry me? I cannot live without you. I want to grow old with you. I think that when you smile, the sun shines. And things like those. Naturally, we women will immediately answer yes. On the other hand, the encyclical rejected the majority report, which supports artificial contraception based on the following arguments. Bullet. Traditional teaching fails to recognize the evolutionary character of the teaching. Bullet. The natural law theory of those who support the traditional teaching has been proved to be erroneous. Sexuality is not ordered only to procreation. Sacred scripture says not only, quote, be fruitful and multiply. The famous quote in the newspapers. It says, be fruitful and multiply. That was the quotation. That is in Genesis 1:28. But the Bible also says, quote, they become one flesh. 2:24, portraying the partner as another self. In other words, you're just one half of a human being. You find your partner, you find the other half, you become a complete person. Allow me to emphasize the most categorical support for artificial contraception in the majority opinion. And I'm quoting, in some cases, intercourse can be required as a manifestation of self-giving love, directed to the good of the other person or of the community, while at the same time, a new life cannot be received. This is neither egocentricity nor hedonism, but a legitimate communication of persons through gestures proper to beings composed of body and soul with sexual powers, unquote. The whole controversy over the encyclical is painful and disturbing to a Catholic. But it has also aroused the ordinary Catholic to be much more aware of her own personal responsibility. It has made the Catholic realize that the church hierarchy does not have all the answers. It has forced her to think about the role of individual conscience. The teaching of the Catholic Church on contraception is one of the important reasons why the absolute majority of the church authority, the absolute authority of the church, has grown weaker over the years. The RH Act is a result of the deepened sense of history among Catholics. Many of us Catholics are now more aware that our church authorities made wrong decisions in the past. To our mind, those errors show that certain teaching should only be relative to their own times and not permanent for all times. I very humbly appeal to church authorities to emphasize strong leadership on moral issues such as war and peace, poverty, corruption in government, instead of on an issue like the RH Act. Humanae Vitae defends the rhythm method. Thus, it rests its argument on the physiological structure of the act. However, certain contemporary theologians insist that the basic criterion for the meaning of human actions is the total person and not some isolated aspect of the person. I very humbly submit that the reason for an exclusive rhythm method given in Humanae Vitae is too strongly biological. I very humbly submit that Humanae Vitae has opened a disconnect with Vatican II, which allowed for a wider basis for evaluating the morality of such a human act, namely, quote, the full sense of mutual self-giving and human procreation in the context of true love. Reformulation of Catholic doctrine. After Vatican Council II, Catholic doctrines began to be reformulated under the recent historical theology. According to a church historian, the guiding principles of this new historical theology are, bullet, the inadequacy of every era to define the truth for future eras. Bullet, the traditional view of revelation as the transmission of definite fixed concepts was replaced by the idea of revelation as a personal self-disclosure by which God encounters the total person and